Joining me now is the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. Prime Minister, welcome.
Good to be with you.
You said on multiple occasions before the election that you would not touch negative gearing or capital gains. How would you describe those statements now?
Well, we've changed our position.
No, how would you describe those statements now?
We've changed our position. They were statements that were made, and that's why we've been upfront that we've changed our position. And we've changed our position because we couldn't sit back and continue to watch young people being frozen out of the housing market. We couldn't continue to see a situation increasingly develop where generations, this generation and future generations, were locked out of the housing market because it wasn't fair. We couldn't also sit back and continue to see that income from labour is treated so differently from income from assets. So for a long period of time, people have been talking about the need for tax reform. This is tax reform. It is also resilience. It is also a cost of living measures that we're putting in place, because every single dollar raised through tax changes is being given back in the form of tax cuts.
Were those statements promises?
They were statements. And we have changed our position.
Yes, but are you not able to say that they were election promises?
Well, we've changed our position, Sarah.
You won't say it.
Well, they were statements that were made, and we've changed our position. Just like we've changed our position on halving the fuel tax rate. We said that was an issue during the last campaign. We weren't in favour of it. We've changed our position in order to provide that support. And we want to make sure, when it comes to the substance of the change, the fact that people are concentrating on the process says to me that we've got the substance right. We've got the substance right because for a long period of time, people have said that we needed to do something about it. Now, we'd thrown everything at housing. We took to the election the 5% deposits. We've got 5% deposits. We've got the Housing Australia Future Fund for public housing supply. We have build to rent for private supply. So we have our shared equity scheme as well.
So when did you make this decision to include these taxes in this budget?
Well, we made the decision in the budget, very late in the process this time around, because of what occurred on December 14 and the fact that the budget processes were more uncertain this time because of the global situation, the volatility that we're seeing in the global economy.
So the discussions around this change happened last year, but you're saying the final decision was taken a few weeks ago?
Final decisions were taken very recently, but of course...
Were they taken in relation to your decision on the export tax for gas? Was there any correlation between these two things?
No, not at all.
But it was under consideration for months?
No, well, Treasury, of course, as we've said from time to time, there is a whole lot of commentary. How dare Treasury look at things? They look at things. I was convinced that we're able to do a change to position, but one that is fair. So one that is fair because of grandfathering the changes, so people with existing investments will be able to continue to have them, but also by having negative gearing being available for new builds, what it does is, like the current system, individuals can invest to increase their assets and their wealth in the future. They can still do that. The difference is that they will also be investing in the assets and wealth of the nation, because it will encourage the boost in supply.
Just on that issue of grandfathering, grandparenting, I think the Treasurer said last night, how do you explain to a young person that the advantages of negative gearing enjoyed by older generations are now locked in forever, entrenching that inequity?
Well, the first thing that you would say to them is that they have negative gearing available to them for new builds. The second thing you'd say is that the average time in which negative gearing operates is a little bit over 5 years. That's because either people dispose of a property or it becomes positively geared over a period of time. Negative gearing doesn't continue off into the future unless there are some rather strange arrangements. In general, that is the system. And that's why as well, fairness is making sure that we don't change the basis of people who've gone into investing in a property on the basis of arrangements that were made available to them, that we don't change tax arrangements halfway through.
I want to come back to you reaching the decision. There's going to be, I think, 700,000 more Gen Z voters on the rolls at the next election. In those discussions that you were having a few weeks ago, were you discussing at that time the political payoff for you, that by doing this, if the opposition chooses to oppose all of these changes that you're bringing forward, that it will damage itself in the eyes of young voters?
No, we were discussing the merits of the policy and whether it stacked up. That was our sole focus was, is this good policy? Will this advance the nation's interests? I've spoken about resilience. Resilience means the fuel security plan that we've put forward, our defence security, $53 billion of increased investment there, making sure we're less vulnerable to global events. That's what a future made in Australia is about. But resilience is also about social cohesion, about having an economy that works for people, not people thinking like they're working for the economy but they just can't get ahead. And more, not just young people but their parents and grandparents saying, I just think my kid, young Johnny or young Mary's locked out of the housing market. That's not the Australian way. I want the Australian dream of home ownership to be available for this and future generations.
But at the same time, you're able to walk and chew gum. You at that time, I assume, there were considerations and conversations, or in the lead up to that, about the political payoff for you. How much of a draw for you was the benefit this brings in terms of that very large number of Gen Z voters coming on the rolls at the next election?
If you concentrate on good policy, the politics will look after itself.
You want to
What we are concentrating on here is good policy in the interests of young Australians, but also in the interests of that social cohesion, in the national interest as well. And we have concentrated, we've said, when it comes to housing policy, supply, supply, supply. This is another measure that will help to drive supply, but it will also mean that young people get a fair crack.
Do you want to see house prices fall?
The indications from these changes is that house prices will continue to increase, but they'll increase at a slightly slower rate.
And that's what you want to see happen?
What I want to see is increased supply, and I want to see young people have the opportunity to get into home ownership.
Did you ask for any modelling on how many homes could be made available to young home buyers if the grandfathering conditions were less generous?
No, because I was never interested as Prime Minister in not having a system in which grandfathering operated.
Australia is now one of the highest taxing capital gains regimes in the entire world. How is that a budget working for Australians?
A budget working for Australians
in relation to
is a capital gains tax system that taxes based upon real gains. That is for the gain less inflation. That's what a real gain is, and that equalises it with income. And so you're changing the system so that it's fairer in the way that it treats assets from income from assets and income from labour.
And is that how you expect investors in Australia to look at your change in capital gains?
These are changes. Before 1985, there wasn't any capital gains tax at all. In 1999, John Howard made this change. And what has happened is the distortion in the investment market towards housing and away from areas such as equities, for example, that can help business to grow and can help the productive side of the economy. So one of the things I expect to happen here is a productivity bonus, because investment won't be distorted by the way that the tax system operates, so that people will be taxed on the real gains. That is a common sense solution.
Just to come back to the impact this is going to have on the investment community in Australia. With negative gearing, you have allowed other forms of negative gearing to continue. Why not just make the capital gains taxes apply to housing? Why make it across the entire asset?
Because we wanted to make sure that there weren't distortions in the investment market. The advice was very clear about that.
Well, then why are you getting such a strong reaction from the investor community today saying investment dollars will go elsewhere?
Well, some of the comments haven't been based upon the policy. We will go out, we'll continue to consult, we'll engage. I believe this is a common sense change. As I said, it goes back to the system. In a range of the changes that were put in place under the Howard government came in because there were rivers of dollars coming in because of what was happening in international markets, and changes were made that frankly have made a difference in terms of distorting markets and distorting investment decisions going forward. This will help to drive productivity.
Just briefly, we're expecting Angus Taylor's budget in reply tomorrow. We're expecting a focus on housing and migration. Net overseas migration is going up that's clear in the budget. That must work against your housing targets.
Net overseas migration has fallen by 45% on our watch. It's at 290
against post-COVID numbers. It's important people understand that.
Well, that is important. They were growing when we came into office. That is just a fact.
But you accept that the numbers that we saw in the budget papers yesterday showing that net overseas migration is increasing will work against your housing targets?
No, it actually shows 295,000 the current year, falling to 245,000 and then falling to 225,000. And we have a range of measures in place to make sure that that occurs.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks very much, Sarah.